Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, as a Patreon request from the artist in question, I'm talking about the not really new album from Zept. Alright, Zept is the musical project of one Liam McCartan, and I was first made familiar of his work around the end of 2018 or beginning of 2019, directly through Patreon request again. This is his second time requesting a project he'd made. First request I got was of his Q2B EP, and while that did not get a proper video, I did write up a text post on it, which I'll link in the description. Yeah, people who donate on the $10 tier on my page can get me to check out their own projects, and I will write up text posts on them directly on the Patreon page. Or if I happen to want to and have enough to say, then I'll do a video. But obviously, as been the case for all the other Patreon requests, this is not something that actually happens quickly. This album came out all the way back at the end of January, and I'm only just now getting to it. And I still got quite a few I need to get through after this, but whatever. Now, when I heard this guy's debut EP, I thought it was pretty decent. Though despite being an obscure Bandcamp artist with not much of a following, he definitely had the production skills of a pro. The project sounded great, super polished and well balanced, to the point that you could have told me that it was like a throwaway runoff EP from someone like Meatbeat Manifesto or Ski Mask, and I probably wouldn't have questioned it. The trouble is he didn't have much of an identity of his own. He sounded similar to lots of different artists I've heard over the years, be it Burial, Oudaker, One O Tricks Point Never, a guy called Gerald, Black Dog, Drum, or whoever else applicable. And none of it really knocked my socks off, strongly resonated with me emotionally, or stuck with me in the long term. I had to come back and re-listen to it to even remember what it sounded like at all. But now he's got a proper debut album. Well, sort of. It's only 27 minutes spread out over 7 tracks, so it's barely an album, if that. It's as much of an album as The Orb's Pommes is an album. I think it's even shorter than his debut EP. But it does appear he's getting a bit more attention. This album's been purchased more on Bandcamp already than, like, all my own albums combined have been. And it appears to have been covered by a minor outlet or two. It certainly looks pretty professional. More so than most artists who directly pay me to cover them, that's for sure. I wasn't sure whether I was gonna have much to say about this particular new album, and it turns out I didn't really, but I did a video anyway because why not? I will say a lot of the same issues I had with the Q2B EP also show up here. I still probably wouldn't be able to pick Zept's sound out from a crowd or figure out who he was if I had him on my iPod, and I were just to put it on shuffle. But these problems are less of a problem, I guess. I generally enjoyed this more than Q2B. There were a few more tracks here that felt like they popped out at me more. Not to mention it felt tighter and flowed much better. That's another thing. The 6 tracks on Q2B didn't really feel connected to each other in any way. It was just a loose collection of ideas. This project felt like it had more of a purpose and a direction while still keeping the experience pretty varied. It's pretty cool. So, may as well discuss individual tracks. I will say this thing starts off strong. 1D, 2D Rise is a very effective and attention-grabbing album intro. Very slow build of synths that starts out not much more than some plinky piano-like leads, but various other pads slowly come in and envelop and overtake it, and start to really sound massive and dramatic, and I'm like, hell yeah, I'm ready for this. And that build-up is paid off in second track again. A very thudding and heavy breakbeat track that has a lot of weight and impact to its skittering beats and melodies that float out into the ether. I think it might even detect some vocals in the background. The whole thing is quite Sakura Burst-esque. The breakbeats themselves are pretty standard and stick to tried and true sounds you've heard plenty of other people use before, but they sound plenty good enough to make up for that. Arrival keeps up the momentum from before. It's a strange track that has lots of slapping and clapping beats and melodies that plink away at high speed in like a One O Tricks Point Never or maybe Rusty-like kind of way. Seems to have 2 pulses going on at the same time that still match up. It's like using subdivisions of 12. Pretty neat. Adds the mildly experimental approach to the whole thing, I guess. Doesn't stick out to me as much as I'd like, but it at least works pacing-wise, I suppose. What's the next track? Axis Praxis. That's probably the single biggest high point on this project. You got these flashy trance leads going up against tons of banging and visceral and heavy beats, significantly heavier than anything earlier on in the album. The whole mix is pretty dense and barely manages to get everything to fit together, almost feels like it's about to burst at the seams. really comes together in an epic way. Level aims to hit with the same sort of impact, with its hammering percussion patterns thudding away and sounding like a helicopter next to these giant distorted kicks. Kinda has an industrial slant to it, I suppose. And these killing and lo-fi pads trying to create this triumphant but nostalgic feeling is pretty interesting. Radio silence is a nice more chill moment with pleasant ambient pads and chopped up radio vocal snippets, and later some breakbeats and plinky melodies that very much remind me of Aphex Twin's Flim, though a little bit at the expense of the pacing. Oftentimes it kinda just deflated the momentum that the project had built up to that point. Did get better with repeat listens though. And then finally we close with Some Things Can't Last a Long Time, a tribute to the late Daniel Johnston and a solo accordion piece with intentionally low quality audio. Very much feels like it's hitting the same note for me that the end of Niels Fromm's All Melody did. That project closed out with a solo harmonium piece, and that was immediately where my mind went to when I heard this. Perhaps unfortunately this was probably the track that I least look forward to at any point. Felt a bit too dragged out for its own good. Though it does hit the right emotional note for me to still be satisfying. So yeah, that's A. And yeah, it was a pretty solid project. I will say that Zept did at least deliver something more unique than last time, the way he combines synth tones you might see in EDM and trance music with stuff that's pretty clearly going for more IDM song structures and ideas is pretty interesting. And he's not wearing his influences on his sleeve as much as he was before. I'd still be lying if I said that this stuff was so impactful or out of the box that I'm gonna really want to come back to it much in the future. But honestly, I think my biggest issue with the project is that I just wish it were longer. If it had more tracks that were roughly on the same quality level and kept up the same pacing and variety, I think it could have been something special. It's still not much of an album, but it's clearly a labor of love and a well-constructed one, and hey, if nothing else, I see more potential here to even further wow me. If he can show the same level of improvement from that EP to this project on his next one, I think Zept might really become a name worth paying attention to. So yeah, I think I'm overall feeling like a 7.3 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters, they're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.